Hi team, Jen here. I am making this video as part of my writing overview series that is intended to help students who are taking courses with me to better understand the complexities of the academic genre. In this video installment today, I wanted to address what an academic essay is because students in my classes and students in many classes, particularly in the humanities, are asked often to write academic essays. And that can be a very confusing, it can be a very confusing thing, even for academics. So this video is going to present some ways to define the academic essay and some ways that you can meet some of the criteria. So first of all, an academic essay is a high caliber of essay. It's the kind of essay, for example, that you will get when you go into the library database and you do a search for a peer-reviewed article. So that's the caliber that we're looking at when we talk about academic essays. Now, do I expect that students are going to write publishable essays? Sure. But I think that it's a goal to shoot for, and I think that looking at published peer-reviewed academic essays can give students a sense of what the key moves are of the academic essay. So going there can be very helpful for students who need examples of what this genre looks like. So to get started with, I wanted to first talk about the audience, the readers, the discourse community that the academic essay takes as its model for who they're writing for, right? So the discourse community for an academic essay is other academics, right? You're an academic, I'm an academic. Published writers are academics. So the definition of an academic kind of runs the gamut, right? What makes an academic is up for debate, absolutely. But academics are interested in reading academic work. And the reason that we are interested in reading works that are considered academic is because they push forward our ways of thinking about texts and context. So there are a couple assumptions that you should make when you sit down to write your academic essay for me. Different instructors might have different ideas of who your discourse community is, but I have a very clear set of ideas of who your discourse community is when you're writing an academic piece. So the first thing that you want to consider is that academics already have a basic sense of the texts and the context that you're writing about. You must always assume that when you are writing an academic essay, at least in my opinion. So for example, if you're writing an essay about love in the time of cholera, you need to make the assumption that the reader of your essay has taught love in the time of cholera, has written a book about it, has all of the basic fundamental knowledge that she would need in order to understand, say, the plot of Love in the Time of Cholera. So you don't need to spend much time, if any time, summarizing the plot of texts in an academic essay. On the other hand, summary can sometimes have a role in the academic genre. I will direct you to my overview video on summary versus analysis for a discussion about that. But keep in mind that your discourse community, first of all, they are professionals in what you're talking about. They already have a basic understanding. So when it comes to things like defining your terms or summarizing the story's plot, these are things that you want to probably not do, although sometimes you could do them if you are speaking about them in very unusual ways or very interesting ways that the reader might not have encountered before. But if you're going to say offer a definition of cholera, in your essay, it's not really functional there because your reader already is familiar with cholera. In fact, she's done her dissertation on it. So there's no real need to do that. It can be a little bit offensive for an academic to read an essay in which the basics are given. Academic essays are expected to be of a very high caliber and for the knowledgeable academic or for the curious academic. So any kind of information that the reader might not know, she'll feel motivated to look that up or to consult your works cited page to learn more about some of the things that you discuss. So keep that in mind. Another thing to know about your discourse community is that academics almost always go to academic essays in order to see what is new and refreshing, what is controversial right now concerning the text or the context that are on the table. So academics, at least I'm speaking for myself here as an academic, your discourse community really wants to see risk taking. They want to see that you're addressing something that's important. Because for academics, what we write has the possibility of changing how we think. So we're looking to academic essays to really jolt us out of our usual way of thinking and to show us something surprising. Now, there are a couple ways that you can do this as a writer. Which brings me to my second point. How should you write an academic essay? Well, for me, one of the best ways to write an academic essay is to begin with yourself. I believe that academic discourse is moving this way, and if it isn't moving this way, I believe that it should. That academic works, academic inquiry begins with the reader, the writer, right? So it's important for me that when you sit down to write an academic essay, that you begin with you. You begin with your close reading. You begin with your grappling of the primary texts or contexts. And that can relate back to your personal history or your value systems or your emotional responses. Excuse me. There are many ways to grapple with texts and context in a personal way, but I believe that essays start from that personal aspect and that academic essays, when they can, ought to include some of that detail as part of the line of inquiry because I find that to be pretty important. Another thing that academic essays do is they ask questions, not literally, but figuratively, sometimes literally, depending on your line of inquiry, but they pose questions that are important. The body of questions that drive your line of inquiry must have relevancy. They must mean something for your reader. So think about making sure that the central questions that you use to develop your inquiry are important and that you manifest that importance for your reader. The third thing that your academic essay ought to always do, without exception, is to articulate very aggressive, controversial, highly interesting and engaging arguments. You absolutely always must make arguments. Now, to make an argument, that means you have to judge something. You can watch my overview video on how to make arguments in another installment. But for now, you have to know that the argument is the driving factor of the academic essay. If I had to narrow it down just to say, guys, there's one thing you need to know about the academic essay, that's what it is. So with that in mind, you want to conform every aspect of your essay to that argument. That's a really important part. Another part of the academic essay, we could call this the fourth part of the academic essay that is important, is that it does tend to have a certain style or tone. Now it's a tricky thing to talk about because I think that academic essays ought to always involve, right? The kind of essay that Aristotle would have written shouldn't be the same kind of essay that we're writing in the 21st century. On the other hand, there are hallmarks of essays through time that are functional, that work, that have credibility today. So when you sit down to write your academic essay, I want you to think about it as part of a tradition, but also as a canvas, on which you can kind of splatter your own interpretation to the genre. And I think that's very important to think about. For example, if you are somebody who writes naturally with a lot of pathos, for example, maybe you're really sarcastic, or maybe you like dark humor, or maybe you pull in a lot of cultural pop culture examples, or whatever. Whatever seems natural and genuine for you about your own voice, I want you to try to make that or let that come through in your academic writing. Now, me, I'm much more playful in person than I am in my writing, which tends to be very serious. Um, that's just how I like to write. We all have ways that we enjoy writing. Um, and I want you to tap into that pleasure factor when you sit down to write an academic essay, because I think that pleasure and enjoyment and your sincere voice does have a place in this genre, and it ought to come through. But at the same time, it's important to make sure that you have a balance of all three appeals in your academic essay: ethos, pathos, and logos, at least. And that every paragraph has that balance. You can watch my overview video on how to construct paragraphs in this genre in another installment. But keep in mind that having a balance is important. This is a genre that values credibility very, very highly. Because in this genre, you are making assertions and observations and arguments that are meant to change the way that we think about the context, or the text or the context that are on the table. You don't want to just say, "Hey guys, this is how I read the text," or "Hey guys, this is how I read this context." Instead, you want to point your finger and you want to interrogate, you want to problematize, and you want to say, "There are some issues here, right? There are some problems. I'm going to make an argument, I'm going to take a stance about it, and I'm going to offer some clarification, some resolution, some clarity, maybe even some solutions toward unpacking some of those complexities." So the academic genre is almost a political artifact, right? It functions as a way to make waves and make changes. When you sit down to write your academic essay, I want you to think about it in that way. It's not just an essay that shows that you've understood what you read. In fact, it's really not that at all. It is an artifact that shows instead that you're engaging with what you've read, and that you're pulling something out of it that means something, even if it's that you think it sucks, right? Talk about some of that, unpack some of that complexity. So I want you to start to think about what you're writing when you sit down to write. And of course, there are examples galore. If you go to the library database, go to JSTOR or Project Muse, bring up an essay on anything and take a look at what they're doing, right? Academics want to think that they're changing the world. Whether they are or whether they aren't is up for debate, but they want to believe that they are. That's their mission. And academics want to read essays that believe they're doing the same thing. So I hope that gives you some insights into this very slippery genre. Enjoy it and practice it. It takes a lot of practice.